Hello and welcome to the Daily Atheist Morning Show. It is Friday. Finally, we made it to Friday. It's Friday. I'm so ready to be done with this week. Ready. Anyway, Friday, the 20th of November, 2020. I'm your host, the Amazing Super Chris. Thank you for joining me on this ungodly hour. I'm trying to learn how to say that. I kind of like, I'm going to steal the ungodly hour thing. It's mine now, bitches. It's mine. Anyway, I've got my co-hosts, Andy Hall from the Laughing in Disbelief blog over at Pathos. He'll be joining me in just a minute. And Nokasuchi from the Rage channel here on YouTube. He'll be joining me as well. And we have got Jason Foux from the Laughing in Genesis, the Dragons in Genesis podcast. He'll be joining me in just a few minutes right after this.
Life is complicated. These are trying times. There are many questions that need answering. Want to know what's going to help? Atheism. With atheism, you'll get rid of dogma, superstitions, and toxic thought patterns that are holding you back. You can drive while taking atheism, as well as use heavy machinery. In fact, drinking alcohol, fornicating, and Sunday mornings are far more enjoyable with atheism. However, there are side effects. Some evangelicals and fundamentalists will think you are possessed by the devil. But you don't have to worry, because you know the devil isn't real. Just like God. Wake up to your life. Believe in yourself. Believe in science. Atheism.
Filter. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me, Andy and Nokasuchi, and we got Jason Foux. So let me start with Andy real quick. Good morning, Andy. How are you doing, buddy?
3 words. Animaniacs. Dropping today. Animaniacs.
Tell your lies to someone else. The Animaniacs.
The reboot, the new. I'm looking at Twitter right now. Animaniacs. They are dropping on Hulu. So after we're done, right. I'm going to go do some binging of Animaniacs.
That's wonderful. Awesome. Okay, good for you. We know what you're going to be doing. Nokasuchi, brother, you going to be doing some Animaniacs?
No, I'll be editing videos and streaming all day. Hoping to catch a shift at work tonight, but that'll depend on others' laziness. So,
gotcha. Understood. Hey, Jason, man, how you doing? It's been a day or 3. It's been a minute since you've been on the show.
I've been gone a while, and not just as a guest anywhere, but even from the live chat of basically everything. This show, Tart, Axioms on Trial, all 85 of Ethan's shows, Brain Bug, everything. Yeah. I've been busy. Just research and more research and doing stuff around the house. And at work, I have been swamped. I mean, like 70 hours a week for the past several months. So really? I'm tired. And I still have more work to do. I have like the next 10 days off, and it's going to be jam-packed the whole time. So
I'm jealous.
No rest for the wicked.
They took half of my hours away, and I'm like, I need something to do, and I need money.
Yeah. I actually feel bad because it's like I'm swamped with work, and so many people right now are either having their hours cut back or they're just not working at all. It's like 2020 has been horrible for like 7 billion people. For me and my girlfriend, it's actually been surprisingly good. And I actually kind of have like survivor's guilt because of that. So
you shouldn't. No fault of your own. You can't control what the rest of the world is doing. So
yeah, I'm trying to help other people though. A bunch of the listeners to the podcast, they all chipped in to buy a crap load of stuff, a couple $1,000s worth of stuff to use for relief work down in Louisiana after they got hit by 3 major hurricanes in like a 2-month period.
Wow.
The bedroom I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. A tree that I used to jump over as a kid fell on it.
Wow.
My grandmother, her garage is like 2 feet tall right now. I know someone who lost everything. Like their whole house was destroyed. They have like the clothes on their backs. And so my listeners, they came in, they donated to this big GoFundMe, and we channeled a
wonderful.
crap load of money down there. We got chainsaws and generators and clothes and all kind of good stuff. So,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I grew up in North Carolina, and we had Hurricane Hugo. And I remember my best friend was inside of his house, and the hurricane lifted a 2-ton oak tree and slung it into his house while they were inside the house. I mean, it was like the scariest thing ever. The hurricanes, they're no joke. No joke at all.
It's basically an F2 tornado that's the size of a state, and it takes hours for it to blow through. That's not fun.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's unfortunate. Sorry to hear about that.
yeah, it's getting better though. I mean, the rebuilding effort it's crawling along. My people are all safe. They're recovering. They're getting everything back in order. And
Yahweh must have answered their prayers.
Right. We got on our knees. We had like a big praying, and it was great.
I thought hurricanes were God's wrath. What are y'all talking about?
Yeah, there must have been like some gay people down there like that weekend. Maybe a parade or something. I don't know. I don't know how the rules work.
Of course. Well, before we get too far along, before we get into the dragons and Genesis part, because we're going to talk about Yahweh, not me. We're going to talk about Yahweh. I want to go ahead and say hello to everybody in the damn nation. Good morning, everyone, you wonderful people. Junk Shop Library, Critical Cripple, all you people. Thank you. We've got 3 different YouTube channels, almost 20 Facebook pages that we stream to, the Daily Atheist Morning Show podcast, Discord even with bad audio. We're doing up audio. You know, if you like classic audio, like you're talking to somebody on a phone from like the 80s and they're far, far away, go listen to our podcast, or go listen to us on Discord, and you'll have that very same experience. And also on the TrumpFamilyTreason.com website, we're also streaming to there. So, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Now we get to the goodies. Wait. I just want to say I hope everybody has a good weekend. I had a good week. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you for joining us. Now, goodies. Jason.
Oh,
Yahweh.
me? What'd I do?
Yeah. I've been waiting for this. I enjoy the
this?
talks about who Yahweh was. Is Yahweh God?
Maybe.
Maybe.
It's kind of a point of view thing. Like, which century are we talking about here?
Yes.
So,
well, you know, but again, hey, that's a great thing
Yahweh
that you should
changed.
say that. The great way that you should say that before we go too far depends on what century, right? So, according to my thumbnail over there, who is God? Depends on how old you are. Are you guys familiar with what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
To me, it's definitely Alanis Morissette from Dogma.
Alanis Morissette.
Yeah.
Andy, show your age, brother. Who's God?
George Burns. George Burns.
Burns.
I mean, he's a funny Jew.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that out there. You know, I just wanted to point. Notice in the progression, though, the new one would be me.
Well,
I don't
know
if y'all knew that or not.
I'm here to support your psychosis, Chris. That's what I am.
I knew you were with me, man. I knew you were there for me.
There is something that's in space looking over the Earth. I have it in my background right now. It's called the International Space Station. So I'm going to maintain that the ISS is Yahweh.
What kind of sacrifices do we have to offer to the ISS? Like, does it take like chili dogs? What do we give to it?
Chili dogs, and you can't have sex in space.
Yikes.
They always have a sex rule. They always have a sex rule.
Yeah, they always have a sex rule.
So,
You
Jason,
sacrifice your glass on your cell phone. That's the tech god. Oh, hey.
Can you tell me, this poor idiotic comedian that I am, can you tell me the relationship between Yahweh and El?
Yes. So
Thank you, Andy.
And it's one of those things that kind of depends on the century. Originally, El and Yahweh might not have even been from the same pantheon, like entirely separate pantheons. El being further north, and Yahweh being part of little nomadic tribes further down south around like Midian and Edom. And eventually Yahweh kind of got adopted into the Canaanite pantheon. I guess he was like an orphan, and so they just brought him in. They gave him a home. And when that happened, he became one of the favorite sons of El. You could think of El as sort of like Zeus. He's like this great, top tier god. And he had a whole bunch of sons. He had like 70 sons. And each son is set to rule over a different nation. And one of them was Yahweh. Is after he gets adopted into it. And that's operating on the idea that he was adopted into it and that Yahweh isn't just another name for an honorific title, meaning Lord, the way that Baal is.
Right.
Which it also seems to do that as well. I think it's sort of both. It started as a separate entity, and then it got adopted into their pantheon, and it's sort of gotten merged with Baal, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, El was, by this point, once they're all in one pantheon, whenever that happened, El became Yahweh's dad. And you actually see a direct reference to this in Deuteronomy 32:8. El is dividing the nations of the world up among his 70 sons. And Israel, his favorite country, he gives to his favorite son, Yahweh. And depending on what version of the Bible you're reading, they may have completely changed the wording of that passage so that it doesn't look like Yahweh has a dad. It's like, and El is giving away, he's dividing up the nations of the world, and he chose Israel as his own inheritance, or something like that. Like I said, there's like 1,000 different versions of it, but in our oldest versions, it's clearly polytheistic. Yahweh had a dad. His dad was named El Elyon, the God Most High. And so Yahweh was a lesser god. He was a son.
I'm sorry. His name was El Elyon?
Yeah, El, and then the second part is Elyon. And El simply means God. You can actually have different gods that have that title. It just means a god. And then Elyon, Elyon, means Most High. And so El Elyon means the God Most High, or the Most High God. Another example would be El Shaddai, which basically means like the mountains or the twin mountains or the hills. And so that would be the God of the mountains. So that's how that works.
Yeah, this is something that has been fascinating me now here recently, as I've learned that ancient Jews had a pantheon and we're more polytheistic. Where does Elohim fall into all of it? Like, is that the father of Yahweh? Is that who you're speaking of, Elohim?
Elohim is complex. Elohim, the word Elohim can have multiple meanings, and you kind of have to look at the context of each passage to figure out what you're talking about. So it can be a reference to a generic god. You could just, if you're talking about a god and, the people are supposed to understand which one you're talking about, sort of like using a pronoun, like if I'm talking about Chris and I keep saying him, then if I'm saying him, then okay, it's understood I'm talking about Chris. And so Elohim can be a generic term for God. It can also be used to mean a bunch of gods, a whole group. It can be a plural. And so you see this, I believe, in Genesis 3. Adam and Eve, they get kicked out of the garden, and Yahweh says, imagine if they had gotten their hands on the fruit of the tree of life, then they would be like us, like the Elohim, with knowledge and eternal life. And so it's at that point, he's talking about the pantheon, El Elyon himself, all of the other children. And so it can mean that as well. So it's sort of a fluid term. It has multiple meanings, and you kind of have to look at the context.
So it's literally a recognition within the Bible itself that God isn't monotheistic, that there are other gods. And
absolutely.
It's fascinating because, I get attacked for my interpretation of that Genesis chapter that you just talked about, but we have the same exact interpretation. To me, they took of the fruit of knowledge, and then God expelled them and clearly said if they were to eat of the fruit of life, then they would become gods like he was. So, and Christians rail at me for that interpretation. I'm like, that's what the Bible clearly says.
Yeah. And it's not just your interpretation. I mean, this is scholarly consensus, what you're talking about here, especially because it says they would become like us, and it uses
Mhm.
a plural pronoun.
Mm.
Us. It's not saying, oh, they would become like me. It does not say that.
Mhm.
It says like us. And even in the other creation story in Genesis 1, it says that because Genesis 1 is about El, and Genesis 2 and 3 is about Yahweh. Two different stories. But in Genesis 1, it says that in the image of the gods, of the Elohim, he created them. Male and female created he them. So it's saying that El created the human race, male and female, to be like the male and female Elohim, the male and female gods.
Mm.
And this has been examined every different way, and so many scholars have tried to find ways around that passage. But it's clear what it says, and the amount of I guess apologetic acrobatics they have to do to try to make it not say, or to try to say that there could be some ambiguity, and it might not be saying that there are male and female gods. It kind of shows, that they don't really have good footing for that, and they can't even if they could, they still are admitting that it is talking about a pantheon, about multiple gods, because it clearly says that it is, and they don't even try to deny that anymore.
That's intriguing and very interesting, because like I bring that up, and Christians just go insane, like they can't stand it, and to hear that it's like scholarly consensus now is kind of refreshing.
Yeah, there's a great lecture series that you can get Audible and from the teaching company about the Old Testament from Professor Amy Jill Levine, and it is, if you want a crash course in the Old Testament, and from someone who really knows, from someone who makes a living teaching the Old Testament, that is a fantastic resource.
Want to say that name again and the title?
I think it's just called The Old Testament, and it's by Professor Amy Jill Levine. I think Jill Levine is hyphenated, but it's on Audible and the Great Courses.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a lecture series. So if you're not into listening to hours upon hours of lectures, you may find it kind of boring. I love it, but it's not written to be exciting. It's a college lecture course is what it is.
Right.
I love those. I could watch those for hours. Satanim, God is an atheist in my chat, is asking which verse, please. I know, like if you're talking about the passage of Adam and Eve being expelled from the garden, I can't remember the verse, but I do believe it's at the butt end of chapter 3 when they're being expelled.
Yeah, it's at the end of chapter 3, right around the time that Adam, Eve, and the serpent all get cursed. So it's right around there. Just fast forward to the end of chapter 3 and read that. That's where it's at. And the one about El creating all the people, that's at the end of the 6-day creation story, which is Genesis chapter 1. That's day 6.
I'm gonna have to go back and look at that one, because I missed it in the Genesis 1, but I caught it in Genesis 3.
And your Bible may change the wording to say that God created
It's crazy
male and female in his own image, not their own image. They're deliberately changing the pronoun to make it singular instead of plural, which is how it is.
Yeah, human beings changing the word of God.
Craziness.
Are you kidding me?
Right? That's how Goliath became a giant. He was originally like 6.5 feet tall, but they changed.
I know. I was bigger. I'm bigger than Goliath was.
Yeah.
It's a sliding scale range.
It really is.
I'm a giant.
We have a question here for Cindy from Cindy Plaza. She wants to know how can we get to the scholarly consensus on a topic? Because if I debate a Christian and tell them this is scholar consensus, how can I prove it? Is the question. How do you?
Oh my God!
Other than just saying this is scholarly consensus.
Well, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Mr. Dragon, is that scholarly consensus is different from, let's say, a math proof or a double-blind study.
Right. Yeah. It's basically you have the majority of scholars in this particular field who have come to an agreement on one particular opinion concerning the text. Now, consensus on what some of these things originally meant took a major shift after the mid 20th century, because at that point, we essentially had two different lines of text concerning the Old Testament. And this is sort of an oversimplification. Everything with the Bible gets more complicated, but the simplified version is that we essentially had two different versions for the Old Testament. We had the Catholic version that they were all using, and we had the Jewish version, which they were using. The problem with the Jewish version, which is what all Protestant Bibles are based on, is we can only date it back to about the 10th or 11th century AD. These are much later manuscripts, and between the 5th and 10th centuries AD, they underwent massive changes, including the height of Goliath being changed. That's actually an easy, quick way to determine like where your Bible came from. Is it based on the Masoretic text? Grab your Bible, go to 1 Samuel, find David and Goliath. How tall is Goliath? If you use the unit converter and it says that he's 6 feet 9 inches, then it's not based on the Masoretic text. If it says he's 9.5 feet tall, it's based on the Masoretic text, which is preserved by this group of Jews. And this it was in a large state of fluctuation until about the 10th century. And we don't have any version of that prior to that time. So we can only trace that back to the 10th century. And your King James only back to about the 16th century. Now, you have your Catholic versions, and people thought that there were a lot of changes that the Catholics deliberately made, which is true. And you also have Hebrew was translated into Greek, which was translated into Latin, or in some cases, Hebrew into Latin, and then that into English. A lot more different translations going on, a lot more could go wrong, plus deliberate manipulation of the text. Then in the mid-20th century, we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that changed a lot of opinions, because now we had 2nd century BC Old Testament books, and we could compare those to things like the Masoretic text and like the King James Bible and like the Catholic Bible and the Septuagint and so on. And people began to realize that all versions of the text had been changed to different degrees than what they had assumed, and that the Masoretic text had undergone massive changes. And basically the response to that was, oh, but the Masoretic text is actually more accurate than the old versions. And the people of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they just changed everything away from the Masoretic text, which is a nonsensical argument. And so consensus began to change, because we now had proof that, like, Jews used to be polytheistic. This wasn't misinterpretation. This wasn't something about, mistranslation or whatever. They were saying there were multiple gods. And this idea was gradually fading from their theology. And then the Masoretic text and others like it just jumped way ahead of that and said, oh, yeah, we were never polytheistic. You're misinterpreting everything. And look, right here, the text now says one God, and this is the official one.
I get this image of people saying, hey, look at the text, man. It says it's God. It says the God in plurality. It's like, hold up. Wait a second. Let me just do this. Erases, rewrites.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
It says it now.
This is the original. Don't touch it. The ink's not dry. This is the original.
Well, it's interesting because I never heard that. I never personally heard that about the Dead Sea Scrolls, about finding the Old Testament works. You only hear about the crazy Gospels of Mary and the Gospel of Peter. The different interpretations that Christians had of Christ at the time. I've got a copy of those on my bookshelf, but I never once heard about finding Old Testament books and then comparing them and using them in scholarship. That's something you don't hear about. You just hear about the Gospels, the new Gospels that wasn't in the Bible.
Right. And now in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have a whole variety of stuff. And what's great is, thanks to Penguin Classics, you can buy the complete Dead Sea Scrolls on Amazon, have it shipped to your door for $12. I have it on my shelf. It's great.
Yeah. See, the one I got is Penguin, but it's the Gnostic Gospels. It's not the complete, the complete thing. Yeah.
And so your Dead Sea Scrolls, it has every book from the Old Testament except Esther. It didn't have Esther. Now, some of these books are fragmentary, and some of them, there are multiple copies. Like, I think we have like 5 different copies of Exodus, none of which are complete, but you could actually reassemble it to make a nearly complete book of Exodus. And then you can compare that to something like the Septuagint, which was a 2nd century translation done by the Jews from Hebrew and Aramaic into Greek. And that's also incredibly old. You can take that and compare it to the Dead Sea Scrolls. And even though it was translated from Hebrew to Greek and then Greek to English, they are still surprisingly similar to one another. Now, you take either of those two and you compare it to the Masoretic text, which you can get from the Jewish Publication Society. It's called the Tanakh. And you start seeing a lot more changes. There's still far more similarity, but there are still some changes, and there's sort of a pattern with the changes. A lot of your plural pronouns concerning gods have been changed to singular. Yahweh no longer has a dad. It's a pattern. They're trying to, wash away the polytheism from their scripture. So it's not accidental. You can't have 1,000 of the same accidents in the book. It's deliberate. But if you compare that to the Catholic Bible, which their Old Testament, they were working from a different collection that the Jews had. It had 7 extra books in it. They translated it from Hebrew into Latin and then from Latin into English. And it's not as close to what we find at like Qumran or the Septuagint, but it's, in my opinion, closer than the Masoretic text. So it's more reliable, in my opinion, because it has fewer of these, glaring changes made to it. It still has some, and they do some things to try to sort of get Jesus into the Old Testament. There are some things that they kind of change.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit, which appears, I believe, in Isaiah in one particular instance, and it says that the Holy Spirit wraps Yahweh in her like glowing wings, and they change the pronoun to his, and they put a footnote saying that the pronoun was actually ambiguous, and that's why they chose his instead of her. But the pronoun isn't; it's a feminine pronoun. So there are things like that you're going to find in it.
I've heard Christians they try to say that Jesus was Metatron. And that it spoke of Jesus in the Old Testament. So they're trying to find different ways to put Megatron? Jesus in Metatron. It's an angel of the Lord.
I was going to say it was my favorite Transformer.
You failed me again, Starscream.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Metatron basically translates to his own throne, and it's this weird theology. You actually see a lot of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls, talking about this angel that ascends to the highest point in heaven and gets his own throne. And some of that does match up with Jesus. It's the whole thing of like stuff that's in the Old Testament and stuff that's with Jesus is very strange and complex. Now, the Old Testament doesn't say anything about Jesus, but Jesus may have been a character that they sort of extrapolated from the Old Testament, that they took bits and pieces and said, okay, this is Jesus. In which case, the Old Testament would be saying something about Jesus because they're using it, they're quote mining it to create the story about this Jesus character. Whether the man existed or not doesn't matter. A lot of the stuff said about him is coming from different mythologies. That's always been my stance is, whether the man existed or not, whether there was that rabbi 2,000 years ago, what's written about him clearly
most of it's not true. You know?
Yeah. There's a ton of mythology in there. Regardless of its origins, there's a ton of mythology that we can trace back to different sources, like the Old Testament, like the Book of Enoch, like the Melchizedek scroll, and the Ascension of Isaiah, and things like that.
You know, Jason, I want to make an admission here. When I was reading through the Old Testament, and I was very impressed with all the times that God was telling the Israelites what to do. And then I figured out that they were just throwing dice to figure out what God was telling them. Can you tell us about the Urim and the Thummim? Am I pronouncing those two terms right?
Yeah, Urim and Thummim, which apparently Joseph Smith managed to get his hands on. They're like in Salt Lake City now or something.
Magic.
Divination was huge in ancient times. I mean, they have things. We have this one passage in, I think, 4th Ezra, which isn't in most of your Old Testaments. I've got a couple copies of it, but you've got this passage in 4th Ezra where it says that Ezra, while he was in Persia, he drank this magic potion and went into a trance, and his spirit went and communed with Yahweh, and Yahweh dictated the entire Old Testament to him, and he wrote it down. And then he brought the Jewish scriptures from Persia to Jerusalem because it didn't exist in Jerusalem, which is really strange when you think about it. That the Jews had this story that their whole scripture came from Persia. That's odd, especially when you consider that the Persians built the Jerusalem temple. That makes you wonder, like, and when you compare it to Zoroastrianism, you say, how much of Judaism is just a Palestinian Zoroastrianism?
And tell me if I'm wrong. They built the second temple, correct?
Yes, the second temple.
All right.
And we still don't have any archaeological evidence of the first temple. No one's ever found it anywhere, ever. And the descriptions of it seem to be based off of a temple in Assyria built by... is it Shalmaneser III, I believe, who may have been the inspiration for Solomon. It's wonky. But yeah, so things like that, burning stuff over a fire and inhaling the smoke and going into a trance and communicating with Yahweh. That was another big one. White noise, like you would sit by a stream or beneath a tree and just kind of zone out and let this constant noise lull you into a trance and communicate with Yahweh. There's no brontomancy. You would listen to the thunder and try to extrapolate meaning and stuff out of the thunder. Abraham like chops up some animals and like pulls their guts out and strews them about, and it's like, oh, this is what Yahweh wants. That's in Genesis. There were all sorts of these strange things of divination, and Urim and Thummim were part of that. Exactly how it's supposed to work is kind of vague. Maybe it was done like Joseph Smith, where you take this rock, you throw it in a hat, you shove your face in it, and you just start babbling a bunch of nonsense, and someone writes it down into a book, and you build a religion off of it. That may have been how they did it. But yeah, it was these magic rocks, probably not just a river rock that Joseph Smith found. It was probably something a little more fancy. And they were used in some sort of, ritual, often used with divination. Exactly how it worked, I don't know. There's probably a scholar out there who has written a whole book about the use of it, but I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I highly doubt that it's Joseph Smith's methodology, considering he was using the seer stone well before he found those golden tablets, and just kind of incorporated everything into it.
Yeah, using that as a way to find treasure, which mainly meant give me money and I'll tell you where to dig. And then I'm going to run off and skip town before you come after me. The treasure always seemed to be, he always found it in someone else's pocket. Yeah.
He
was great at doing that. So.
Oh yeah, he was really good at being a con man, no doubt.
Yeah. I made a meme about him once. I'll find it while y'all talk.
Yeah.
About how awesome he was.
Joseph Smith. The Myth Vision channel here on YouTube has an entire giant series that's being done right now with Bryce Blankenagel, the host of the Naked Mormonism podcast, and David Fitzgerald, the author of Nailed. It's fantastic. It starts at like day one. This is Joseph Smith and his family, and here's all the batshit crazy stuff he got into. And it gradually starts progressing through, his life as a con man and, abducting people and this religion and everything. You cannot make this stuff up. It is, when you learn about it, you're going to be like, there's no way that happened. And then you look it up and it's like, this happened? Yeah, it is nuts.
He's a very American character. He's a shyster.
He tried to take over the country. Like he literally was trying to take over the country. He had like the largest army in the country. He was going to take over.
He was going to go to war with America. A lot of people don't realize that. My favorite part of Joseph Smith's story is when he was tarred and feathered for sleeping with everybody's daughter. That was my favorite part. I'm like, pimp daddy.
Here's something I wrote back in my book in 2013 about Joseph Smith, my book called The Anti-Theist. Joseph Smith Jr. of Mormon fame was shot in a jail cell, tried to jump out the window to escape, and died in the fall. The guy couldn't even take a couple of bullets in a 20-foot drop to the ground, so I'm hard-pressed to believe he's any type of messiah. Neo from The Matrix could use his mind to stop bullets and could fly. Joseph Smith Jr. performed a similar miracle, except he used his internal organs to stop the bullets, and his flying skills were somewhat lacking.
Nice.
The underwear didn't work. Are you kidding me?
And he had a gun. They said, he was assassinated. He died in a gunfight. He had a gun. He was shooting people during this attempted jailbreak. I think he actually killed somebody in that thing. So it's kind of hard to say, oh man, he was martyred. When you got a pistol in your hand and you're popping caps, you're not a martyr.
But this was also another one of those. This is one of those circumstances where he died in front of a whole bunch of people, and then one of his followers later claimed that like his body glowed and he raised bodily into heaven or something. Typical.
Well, I mean, if they had burned his body, then it would have glowed. But I don't think
that's the spirit.
I mean, was the tar still on him? Was it shining?
I was just going to say that.
Man,
I find it funny that people even believe this stuff. But you're actually, a lot of people don't know that he did raise an army, and he was actually going to go to war with the United States government over, I believe it was the Utah territory. I can't remember the specifics.
Yeah,
there was the Glen was it the Glen Meadow massacre? Do I have that name right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The Glen Meadow massacre.
Where they pretended to be Native Americans and butchered the people coming through Utah.
Yeah, they needed more child brides, so they killed all the adults and they grabbed all the little girls and they carted them off. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, "Oh, we thought we were being attacked."
Yeah.
Like people in Conestogas? Are you kidding me? Yeah. They're up there milking the cows, and you're gonna go and shoot them. I don't think they were that dangerous, man.
Yeah, no, I don't think they were very dangerous either. Fascinating, and I stay away from Mormonism, but I should cover it more because it's just so much crazy there.
It's so interesting because they have like a mommy god, they have like the celestial mother. I still think Mormons have the best afterlife program you could shoot for. If you can become a god.
Yeah. Which it may seem weird. It may seem that the idea that when you die, you kind of ascend and become like your own angel and stuff. That may actually be closer to early Christianity than most other sects of Christianity, because like even Paul writes about stuff like that, how baptized Christians are sons of God. You are transforming into an angel. Some of these sects only wore white to symbolize their continuing transformation as they shed their what they called robes of flesh, or garments of flesh, which meant basically the mortal body, and became celestial beings. And it actually said that when you die, you would be resurrected, and you would actually transform into a star. You would become an angel. You would become a son of El. And that sounds a lot like Mormonism. And so there are some of the really weird, bonkers parts of Mormonism that other Christians think is absurd. Those are some of the things that Christians used to believe like 2,000 years ago. And they've gotten rid of it. And those weren't even Christian ideas. Those actually go back pre-Christian times, like 200 or 300 years before.
Well, even when it comes to the polygamy, Christians rail against Mormon polygamy, but I'm like, when I read the Bible, I see a book that endorses polygamy.
Yeah.
And incest.
Incest,
Marriage equals, one man and one woman. The Bible doesn't actually say that. It's like one man and one woman and her female slaves and
Solomon's harem,
and also, 1,000, one man and 1,000 women. People you capture.
A single sword and 1,000 sheaths. It's one of those,
right? It's Mormonism isn't as crazy when you look at it in early Christianity context.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, what? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was once again, when I was reading through the Old Testament, who really impressed me as a skeptic was Gideon. Gideon devised different tests to determine what God really wanted him to do.
Yeah.
So when Christians say you got to take everything with faith, I always hearken back to Gideon. I think he's in Kings, one of the books of Kings, talking about devising tests of what God really wants him to do.
Yeah, he's like, I think he wants me to do this. Let me put a bunch of tests. And if he wants me to do this, this should happen. Or if he wants me to do this, then this should happen. And then what randomly happens, that's going to be the thing I go with.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Basically just looking for signs everywhere. Like, oh, man, if this girl likes me, then the next car that passes, it'll be a blue car.
I think we all go through. I mean, maybe I'm just
van. There's a car. That's kind of blue in the right light. All right, I'm gonna call her up.
It reminds me a lot of a Native American tradition. The medicine people, or some medicine people, not every tribe, but they would always see signs, and they see signs in nature. And if the eagle's soaring in this direction, then the crops would be good. Blah 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 blah. It's a lot of superstition that it seemed to take part in a lot of different cultures.
Yeah,
right. And it often holds them back, I think. But I don't know. Does it hold them back or does it help? It's the search for patterns that help us learn and grow and things like that. And that's kind of what they're trying to do. Is they're interpreting things and they just don't know what the deal is.
I think it definitely. I think it all holds them back a little bit. I harken back. Dr. Josh was telling a story about how he was a deeply fundamental evangelical when he first went to study theology. And, he was talking about how at first he was trying to prove what he thought was right. And it put him so far behind the rest of his class once he realized, what I thought was right isn't right. And then he had to basically start over. So I think it does, just generally hold people back that have these ancient beliefs.
Yeah.
And that was Gideon you were talking about? I'm unfamiliar with
Gideon
that.
Was a judge, I believe. I think he was in Old Testament before the kingship, before the monarchy.
Of Gideon's Bible fame? Of the
he's still alive. He travels the world just handing out books. He
going to prison.
Books in places.
I've been saying. I was thinking that. Well,
he's like Bible Santa. That's what he is.
I always wondered.
I knew the character was a hero to people. I just never knew that was one of the things that he did, was that he was just kind of this sign seeker like that. I wasn't in depth aware of his character.
I always wondered
who was character because like God or an angel of God approaches him on the road, and he's like, "I don't think you're who you say you are. I'm going to go devise this test if I have the story correct." And then later on, he's like, "I don't really trust what God is telling me, so I'm going to put this some of this sheep's wool into this room, and if it's moist in the morning, then I guess I'm going to do what this thing is telling me to do." it is a fascinating character
Yeah.
in the Old Testament.
Yeah. What was that, Rage?
Well, I was just gonna. I never knew who put all those Bibles in the hotel, so now I
Yeah.
do.
Bible
yeah.
Santa.
Now we know.
Uh,
Bible
Yeah.
Santa.
He leaves an address in the cover, so if he leaves his Bible behind and you find it, you can mail it back to him.
That's,
You know,
that's a good
so you know,
What do you think the
Well,
mall
do the
Santas
good
do,
thing
Range?
and return those. Return.
I've
those
always
Bibles to the
found
guy.
them, like the Gideons, to be. I don't know. I think I probably have an extreme view on this, but I've always found them to be somewhat predatory. They go to prisons and they're feeding on people in the lowest position in life, in a very emotional position, already thinking about their lives and how they went wrong and blaming themselves for not following God. And these Gideons come in there and just take advantage of that. I've always seen them as somewhat predatory.
Yeah. Oh
You
man,
were saying?
we got
Jason?
way off topic.
Way
on
off.
Yeah, we
Oh,
did.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
way off topic now.
We've got about 10 minutes or so. Do you want to continue on with your talking about who Yahweh is? The difference between
Sure, I'll
Yeah,
see
yeah.
how much I can squeeze in about Yahweh. So our earliest mention of Yahweh comes from Egypt. They were getting in a fight with a bunch of nomadic people.
Wait. They stole their god from somewhere else. That's crazy talk.
No,
I'm sorry,
not
to
exactly.
repeat.
It wasn't
I'm
an
kidding.
Egyptian god. What happened was the Egyptians they were fighting a group of nomads over to the east. Arabia, Edom, Midian, around in that area, and there were these different groups of nomads and multiple tribes. Each one was called the Shasu, and then it'd be like of whatever. So like the Shasu of insert the name of whatever totem spirit that group followed. And one of these Shasu tribes was called the Shasu of Yahweh. So their totem spirit was Yahweh. And this is like our oldest mention of Yahweh ever. You cannot find an older mention of Yahweh on earth. And it's like way to the south of Israel. And it's like, it's not even an Israelite god. It's like an Edomite god. And this matches up with, other stories where it says Yahweh comes from Mount Seir. This is in Edom. Moses, after he kills the Egyptian guy and he goes on the run, he goes and hides out in this area. And that's where he meets Yahweh. And so it's this weird tribal god of these nomadic people. And in that area, we also have, around this time, a bunch of metal smelting. It was real big for basically like melting down ore and turning it into metal. And it looks like there were some temples in that region associated with some sort of volcano or metal smelting god that were repurposed to be used for Yahweh, which is weird because we have a lot of volcano imagery associated with Yahweh, like in the book of Exodus. There's this mountain and it's shooting fire out the top, and there's all this smoke and lightning, and the ground is shaking, and like it's throwing stuff up in the air and boulders are falling down. This is a volcano. I mean, they're guided by this distant pillar of fire that they see, and they're walking toward it. This is a volcano. And you also see things like when Moses comes down off the mountain the first time with the 10 Commandments, while he was up there, Aaron, the high priest of Yahweh, took all the gold from the different people and he cast it into the fire. Now, modern Bibles say that the Israelites made the golden calf, but our oldest copies of Exodus say that the spirit of Yahweh went into the fire and molded this gold into the shape of a bull calf. So it was Yahweh that was involved in the smelting of this gold and the forming it. And so it's like, why would Yahweh do that? Well, this is probably a surviving story of an older time when Yahweh was involved in metalworking, and one of his symbols was a giant golden bull. These were in the Jerusalem temple. We have numerous descriptions of them. So this used to be a legitimate form of worship for Yahweh, where you envisioned your God as this metal bull. It was a sign of strength. And so the purpose of that story now is to get away from the worshiping of the idol and to imagine the God as this distant, figure in space, not a metal thing on Earth. But that used to be the point. And so we have another connection
real
of
quick,
him
Jason,
being that kind of God, a metal smelting God.
Real quick, Jason. So when they were picturing God away from Earth now and not on Earth, they were still picturing him as a being, though, correct? It wasn't this spirit that we have now. It was still a being, but it was in space and it was observing us on the Earth.
Right there. Their God was basically, as their theology evolved, he was becoming more powerful, more transcendent, and sort of more distant. If you read the old, like Genesis 2 or Genesis 3, he comes down and he actually gets his hands dirty, like literally. He puts his hands in the ground and he's like building this thing out of clay. And
he can feel the wind on his face.
And he gives it mouth to mouth, and his spirit, his breath of life goes into it, and that creates the first man. Well, later he just says something and it's happening. I'm gonna make the Egyptians suffer. I'm just going to bring about a plague. He's not going in there, carrying an armload of locusts and dumping them out. He's just like, it's going to happen. And then it happens, and so he's kind of becoming more transcendent and more powerful. And as he does this, he's becoming like more removed. You do have some older stories that, were still kept in there, like Judges 1:9. He takes the battlefield with the Israelites and he loses a fight to a metal wagon. The iron chariots kick his ass and Yahweh has to retreat. So you still have some of those that are preserved, but on the whole, he's gradually becoming more distant, more separated. And this is the Israelites trying to get rid of their old methods of worship and gravitate toward this newer idea. And so a lot of their idols, like the bull, the bull as a representation of their god, like the bronze serpent of Nehushtan, which is the serpent in the Garden of Eden. It was also the one in, I think, the book of Numbers that Moses puts on a pole to cure all the people who got bit by the venomous snakes. This was a god they used to pray to. It was a god of wisdom and healing. They got rid of that. They threw that out. The Asherah poles, which were literally 30-foot tall dildos outside the Jerusalem temple. They got rid of all of those. So all of their old idols and stuff that they used to worship, they were getting away from that type of worship and they shoved all that aside. And that may have been a product of Zoroastrian influence, because they didn't use these giant idols and stuff, and they didn't think anyone else should either. So that may have been when that started to happen. But
was Asherah the wife of God? Wife of Yahweh.
Yes. Yeah, she was El's wife, and she's the one who gave birth to their 70 sons, which would include Baal Hadad and Yahweh, along with a bunch of others like Dagon and Mot and all these others.
Real quick, I just want to thank Derek Cruz for the $2 of support to the channel. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. You're wonderful. Appreciate it.
I remember Sammy Jenkins says, I want to worship 40-foot dildos.
Yeah. We should. I mean, these were the Asherah poles. These were, and it actually, I think in the beginning of Second Kings, one of the kings gets all pissed off and he's like, we're getting rid of these things. And it says that they went and they took down the giant Asherah poles, which were these giant phallic statues. And like it says this in the Old Testament, they got rid of the giant. It was like a double row of dildos leading up to the temple. We don't know how many. Maybe it was just one on either side. Maybe
Titans have needs too.
Posts, and there was like 40 of them. We don't know. It was probably like 6 or 8. I don't know. But yeah, they got rid of these things. They're like, nope, no giant dildos in our temple. They've been standing for centuries, but no more. We're not like that anymore. Yeah. So they got rid of that. So God used to be okay with sex toys. His wife decorated the lawn with them. I don't know what changed, but yeah. And so that was one of those things. Asherah, that used to be the wife of El. Yahweh had his own. This was a goddess named Anat. So you're probably familiar with Kali, the Indian goddess. She's like blue skin, 6 arms. She's got goddess. She has swords and she's covered in human heads and hands that she chopped off of her enemies, and she just like wears them. Get rid of the blue skin and give her like an Eastern Mediterranean tan, and give her 2 arms instead of 6, and that's a knot. She was a war goddess. She had some scimitars. She diced people up. There's this one story where I think the god El calls to her while she's on the battlefield, and he's like, can you stop killing everybody for a second and come over to the heavenly palace? And she does, and she's like wearing human heads and hands on her. And I think it said she was on the battlefield. She had killed so many people that the blood was like up to her waist. So you can just imagine her
kind
like,
of dedication.
Right. And so you could just imagine the amount of gore she's just tracking into,
Sounds
Yahweh's
like my kind of woman.
palace, and when Baal, who may have also been Yahweh, died in his battle with his brother Mot, it was Anat who came along and killed the god of death who had killed Mot, or Yahweh, or had killed Baal. She went and killed this evil god. So Baal, one of the main gods of the Canaanite pantheon, he fought Mot and he died. His wife came along and just straight killed the dude, and then helped to get Baal resurrected. And this was also, we have other stories, including one from southern Egypt, because we had a whole community of Jews living down there. They had their own temple and everything else in a city called Elephantine. And this is basically an outpost, so the Egyptians could keep an eye on the Nubians to the south, in case they tried to invade. And the Jews, they had their own community down there, and they had their own temple to Yahweh. And right there, very clearly, it said that his wife was this war goddess, Anat. So, yeah, we have that. So Yahweh used to have a wife, and she was kind of a scary badass.
That's good.
Well, I mean, it sounds like, because I used to know a bunch of polytheists. We're not so much on great terms anymore, but it almost sounds like they've got kind of a better claim than Christianity does when it comes to their pantheons historically. From what I'm hearing, fascinating. This makes me want to go and study this stuff all day.
They had so much. There was so much rich mythology that the Hebrews used to have, and they got rid of most of it. I mean, you look at their Bible, you look at the Old Testament, and most of this stuff, it's either not in there or there are only vague references to it. But yeah, it used to be very prominent and openly worshipped in their temples. Their temple to Dagon, which the main one stood in the city of Ashdod, it wasn't destroyed until 167 BC. So polytheism was still practiced openly right up until the 2nd century BC.
Wow. And it's like, because I bring this up to Christians because I have heard this. I've heard, from several people that the ancient Jews were polytheistic before they were monotheistic. And you bring that up. And the thing that I always get, or not always, but mostly, is, well, that comes from the Catholics. The Catholics are the pagans. And that's why, and I'm like, no, that's not what I hear anyway,
Most of my information on that topic of the pagan, the polytheistic and the Zoroastrian influence on Judaism does not come from Catholics. It does not come from secular sources. It comes from Jewish scholars. Yeah. The Jews are way better at examining their own text than any other religion on earth. That's just.
But how can they without the Holy Spirit, Jason? How can they?
Yeah, they don't have the Holy Spirit.
They're not seeing the big picture here. All right, guys, we have done the hour. It flew by so fast, man. It's so much fun whenever we get Jason.
I could talk about this all day long, man.
All day long,
I love this stuff. I should probably launch a podcast about it.
Maybe. Yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe. We'll get to you in just a second, though. Hold on a second. Hey, Andy, what do you got going on? Anything today or the weekend? You busy?
I made I'm cranking out funny shorts. I have a list of comedy shorts. You can a playlist on my channel, Laughing in Disbelief. I'm cranking out a new one today about the holidays and how I'm ruining my relationship with my girlfriend. It's funny though. It's funny though.
As long as it's funny.
It's funny. And so I'm also, of course, my blog is Laughing in Disbelief. I have a couple of blog posts up that you probably haven't read, and they're funny.
So awesome. Nokasuchi, what do you got going on this weekend? Busy?
I'm not really sure. So like, my hours were taken away at work, so I'm trying to pick up shifts, so I can't really plan streams. I know like today I'm going to be talking about something at noon. I'm not sure what. If I don't work tonight, then I'm going to have an open room. Work tomorrow, and then Sunday I'm not sure what's going on. I'll figure out something. Hopefully I'll be working because I need to work. But with this shutdown, I've got a lot more time. So I streamed like 5 times yesterday, so it was insane.
Well, we'll get your coffee links up, and we'll get other links up, and see if we can help get some coin going your way as we can. So
yeah, I might end up having to do a couple streams in that nature, but we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping that people's laziness will help me succeed this month. So
understood. All right, Jason. So thank you. You've got, for those who are unaware, Jason has the Dragons in Genesis podcast. What do you got going on? I've got the links down below in the description, so please go subscribe to his channel. What do you got coming out?
So I'm producing more content for the YouTube channel, which I wasn't even going to start, but you kind of peer pressured me into it. So I'm going to send you a bill for all this, Chris. So be looking for that. This was originally going to just be a recording booth for the podcast, but I had to get a camera and lights and everything else. But also I'm doing more content on there. I just did an interview with David Fitzgerald. Go check that out. It was great. So I did that recently. I have some more stuff coming out, including some book reviews of some of the different material that I use for the show. That's going to be coming soon. As far as the podcast goes, get on any podcast app. It could be Stitcher, Spreaker, whichever the new Google one is, Apple Podcast, whatever, any podcast app, and just search Dragons in Genesis and you'll find it. I just finished up this giant, it was supposed to be a mini series, like maybe 3 episodes. It turned out to be like 6 or 7, all about the Book of Enoch, which has amazing Jewish mythology.
Crazy stuff.
Oh yeah, there are like mile-tall giants in there. There are angels having sex with people, angels having sex with animals. There's like, that's where elephants and camels came from. Angels have sex with cows. All kind of crazy stuff in there. And there's a lot of stuff in there that would later be recycled for Jesus. And by the end of that thing, I make the case that based on the contents of Enoch, Christianity may have more in common with the Book of Enoch than with the Old Testament. That's a huge claim. That's a crazy claim.
Like yeah.
Check out episodes, I think 48 to 54 of the podcast, and I think I can back that claim up.
Sounds like
there's also some crazy stuff about they have this thing called the Book of Astronomy, which is in there. No one really knows why it's in there. I have my own hypothesis as to why it's in there, and I think it's actually the most important section of the Book of Enoch. I preface it by saying you're not going to read anything from scholars about this, so take it with a giant grain of salt. But I think, again, I can back that up. So go check that out. I cannot remember I think it's maybe called Spirit in the Sky. I don't remember. Anyway, check out that episode. So start with episode 48, go through to like 54. That's all about the Book of Enoch. We touched on Zoroastrianism a little bit. I think that is episode 38, the influence of Zoroastrianism on Second Temple Judaism. It's an episode called The Beginning. Check that out.
Awesome.
But right now I'm digging into the writings of Paul, the 7 authentic letters of Paul. All the different times that Paul seems to be quoting or referencing the Book of Enoch, including parts where he's disagreeing with the Old Testament. And that's one of the reasons I say that Christianity may have more in common with Enoch than Christianity, because when there's a dispute about the Old Testament, early Christianity repeatedly sides with the theology in Enoch and not the Torah. It actually quotes Enoch more than any book of the Old Testament.
Maybe we'll have to have a show on that. Maybe we'll have to have a show on that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
That would be awesome. Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
good.
go check that out. Any podcast app, just search Dragons of Genesis. Look for the giant orange logo with Godzilla attacking the city of Israel, of Jerusalem, and that's it. So
I didn't know that was what that was. I have to check that out too. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Andy and Nokasuchi, and of course, thank you, Jason, for coming back and edifying us, educating us, making us all smarter, whether we wanted it or not.
Fascinating.
Yeah, definitely, dude. I learned stuff.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I enjoy these shows.
Thank you.
I'm so busy running the show that I'll go back and watch this show so I can actually pay attention and enjoy it, because I'm so busy. These are fun shows to watch for me. I mean, later. So, hey, there's Paul Camus. You guys all have a wonderful day. Thank you to everybody in the damn nation. Thank you to everybody listening on YouTube or Facebook or all the wonderful places that we Twitch, Twitter. We're streaming everywhere nowadays. So thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. Well, I'm going to run the Atheist commercial, the commercial we run at the beginning of the show. I'm going to show you because a lot more people show up at the end. So we usually run these commercials at the beginning of the show. Have a great day, and we will see y'all Monday.
Life is complicated. These are trying times. There are many questions that need answering. Want to know what's going to help? Atheism. With atheism, you'll get rid of dogma, superstitions, and toxic thought patterns that are holding you back. You can drive while taking atheism, as well as use heavy machinery. In fact, drinking alcohol, fornicating, and Sunday mornings are far more enjoyable with atheism. However, there are side effects. Some evangelicals and fundamentalists will think you are possessed by the devil. But you don't have to worry, because you know the devil isn't real. Just like God. Wake up to your life.
Thank you for watching the show. A special shout out to my gold level Patreon supporters, Cindy Plaza and Ian Davenport. Thank you, and have a great day.